Well, in case you weren't sure of it before, you know that it happens also in the church. It's this part of the very same dynamic, an effort to keep us quiet.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Joe Rossinello, man, we're going into the breach tonight. I mean, we got a lot to talk about here on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. I mean, Father Frank Pavone, this is a really interesting story, Joe. This is not just, I think, cookie cutter. It's not just conservative priest removed by big bad wolf liberal bishop. I think that's what everybody's kind of looking at with this whole thing. And I'm trying to be very objective. I don't want to see Father Frank Pavone laicized. And for those of you out there who are not up to speed on the news, I don't know how you're not. Father Frank Pavone, as of November 9th, we have to talk about that too. As of November 9th, has been laicized. He's been dismissed from the clerical state. And it's from what I understand, Joe Rossinello, it has to do with blasphemy and disobedience. That's what I heard. Okay. And I'm listening to all these voices that I respect, Joe. I respect all the voices out there. Okay. I listen to, a lot of different people. And quite frankly, I think that we can offer, first of all, we should be offering a lot of prayers for Father Pavone and for Priests for Life, because they are the foremost anti-abortion organization in the world. Okay. So we need to offer prayers for them. And we need to break it down a little bit, because I think we have to take a step back from, I think what I'm seeing, Joe Rossinello, is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And again, I'm notorious for knee-jerk reactions, Joe. So I don't judge people who have those. Okay. Believe me when I tell you. But I want to kick it over to you to start the conversation, because I just want to be clear about what's going on before I'm going to make any sort of determination on what I think about this. I could say what's in my gut. I could say what's in my heart. Okay. But I want whatever I say, I want it to be based on the facts on the ground. So with that, Joe Rossinello, I want to throw it over your way.
Before I give my commentary, I guess, on the incident itself, that clip that our producer John ran in the intro, dude, what's up with the leather jacket?
I noticed that. Noticed that.
That is ridiculous. I'm sorry, dude.
I can't. We're gonna
ridiculous.
It reminds me. It reminds me a little bit of. And again, I'm sure we were going to.
He's Arthur Fonzarelli now, dude.
Well, he's Arthur Fonzarelli, or he's Father Carapi. Remember Father Carapi?
That's where I don't want it to go. That's where, do you remember when Carapi went off the reservation and he had that video? What was he? The lone sheepdog?
No, he was the black sheepdog. He was the black sheepdog.
Joe, that's like going to the gym with black socks up to your knees and Velcro sneakers on, dude.
Yeah, right.
No,
Yeah,
no,
you don't do it.
You don't do it. That's where like your friend or like your brother or like your brother-in-law, you're like, dude, put on the white socks. You're going to the gym. Get rid of the you got black socks up to your knees. What is that leather jacket?
I don't know. I'm not
seriously. That is just like. Oh my gosh.
I know. I know what you're saying, and this is where I have a little bit of a problem. Okay, not with Father Pavone wearing a leather jacket, but let's talk a little bit about, I think, Joe Resinello, a proper conversation for us to have is the danger. And I do think it's a danger. And Joe, I respect these men. I want to say that first and foremost. But the danger of making priests into celebrities, that is a route. Now, a priest could be well known, very well known. Father Mike Schmitz is very well known. Okay. I find Father Mike Schmitz to be of the more humble variety. I really do. I don't think I'm seeing him wrongly when I say that man is a humble man and he knows he's got the biggest podcast on social media. Okay. He knows it. And I think there is a danger here with celebrity priests. Father Pavone is one. Father Carapi was one of them. Father Carapi was instrumental. And when I said this before at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, in my reversion, or if you want to talk about practicing the faith again, Father Carapi, and listening to him, his dynamic way, his dynamic style, his telling the truth very bluntly about sin and death and judgment and heaven and hell, that brought me back to confession, Joe, over time. But he was instrumental along with others. Okay. But he became a celebrity. Okay. He became a celebrity and it ended up not ending very, very well for him. And we're still at the point years later where people say, I mean, listen, I missed an update. Where's Father Carapi? Where's Father Carapi? Well, maybe he ain't Father Carapi anymore, or he's not practicing, he's not practicing a ministry anymore. It doesn't negate the good that he did, but we have to be careful because the real priest, Joe, is the one who constantly points to Christ. And I'm not saying these men don't, but I think as people, and you can please comment on this, as lay people, sometimes we become enamored with the priest himself. Okay. And I think that's a danger. And we have a number of celebrity priests out there. I'd love your comments on that. Am I wrong in the way I'm
No, I think you're right. That's why I think the leather jacket's out. He's now the bad boy priest. It's that he's got to lose that. But that's an aside. Getting back to the topic at hand, I mean, couple thoughts. And I'm going to try to be measured and not try to be disrespectful. I think it was excessive, and that's being fair. Clearly,
clarify
meaning
that, Joe.
to be laicized.
Okay.
Like, I think that's excessive. It also seems to me that anytime discipline's coming out of the Vatican, it's on one side of the aisle, the more orthodox side of the aisle. Listen, a lot of priests and bishops over the years, and this is being just objective and fair, have been disobedient. I could look at universities. I'll pick some incidents. University of Notre Dame, when Barack Obama spoke, over 80 bishops wrote Father Jenkins, who was the president of Notre Dame, because there was basically a directive that came out of the U.S. Bishops' Conference that said, if you are pro-choice, you can't have a platform at a university. Something along those lines.
Right.
Jenkins went against it, which is an act of disobedience because he's under the jurisdiction of a bishop, even though he's in a university. It's a Catholic school that falls under that jurisdiction. 80 bishops basically wrote a letter, 80 voices. He still did it. That's one example. I could go on and on. There's been disobedience with regard to the liturgy. There's been disobedience with regard to catechesis. There's been disobedience with regard to, frankly, homosexuality.
Well, Joe, throw out a major example was the bishops up in Canada when Humanae Vitae was written by Pope Paul VI. They blatantly said we're not following this. We disagree with this teaching that came from the Pope that reiterated magisterial teaching of the Catholic Church vis-a-vis contraception. Go ahead, Joe.
No, but disobedience is disobedience. That's why I'm saying it's excessive to laicize him. I think that's excessive. Now, with that said, and this is to be fair, he is under the jurisdiction of a bishop. And if they tell him something, he has to consider that. He takes a vow. Right. He's under, like in all honesty. Now, getting back to Carapi, I remember when he went off the rails and he was living in Montana at the time. And the bishop in Montana said, listen, I'm not having like a lone wolf priest in my diocese. He's out. And I can't fault the man for that. In fairness. With that said, it's excessive. Also, my wife brought up this point, and I think she's spot on it. A priest, His job is to guide souls to heaven. If you look at what Father Pavone has done in terms of guiding souls to heaven versus leading them away from heaven versus what other priests have done and nothing happened to them, it's not even comparable.
No.
It was excessive. Um, with that said, too, Father Pavone has had trouble in the past. Keep this in mind. He was asked to leave New York in Staten Island. Like, I don't know.
Right, and I think some of that had to do, I believe, with the finances of Priests for Life, which, according
Correct.
to Father Pavone in the last couple of days, he said that was all clarified. They were audited, I believe he said, at least twice, if I remember correctly. I've been watching so much information on this, like I said, so many voices, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. So that involved finances. Then they went after him. They did an audit. Now I believe Priests for Life is located in Florida, if I remember correctly. Okay.
It was in Texas.
Right. But here's the thing. At one point, according to Father Pavone, there was an offer made to switch from under the jurisdiction for Father Pavone from one diocese to another, from basically one bishop who was not so, let's just say it like this, not so friendly to Father Pavone, to a bishop that wasn't more supportive of him and the Priests for Life organization. Okay. That was something that was talked about, and ultimately, obviously, that was rejected. Now, that could have been something that was done. Okay. That could have put that, but it does lead you to believe that there are some people that don't like Father Pavone. And I do believe that part of it, and if you want to get into this, Joe, we can. I do think that part of that is the politics. That Father Pavone is a MAGA-wearing Donald Trump supporter, was an advisor to Trump on I believe, or one of his advisors on the issue of abortion. Okay, and I don't think that doesn't play such a small part in this, Joe. I believe it plays a very major part, aside from all the other things that are being thrown around out there. The fact is, Father Pavone unapologetically has supported Donald Trump. And I just think that those who support the Democrat Party vocally, I mean, we could go on. We could talk about nuns on the bus. We could talk about Sister Janine Gramnick, who has the chutzpah. Okay, let me remember that I don't want to curse anymore. So she's got the chutzpah to say that abortion is acceptable in some circumstances. A woman who Father James Martin says should be a saint. They're all dissidents, by the way, and nothing ever gets done. And then when we're angered, I think, like you said, Joe, okay, you wanna give him a slap on the wrist, you want to take him down a peg. You're the bishop or you're the pope. You can do that. All right, you have the authority to do that. But you say nothing to these people. Joe, I did a short video the other day. I don't know if you had the time to take a look at it. It was just a short one. You know what I feel in all this? And it's not because of specifically what's happening to Father Pavone. It's because of the fact that we feel, and I think rightfully so, that there's a double standard here. I feel demoralized.
No, it is. It's a fact.
I'm not angry, Joe, and I know I'm an angry guy. And I know people out there at the front line with Joe and the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. You know that I could get angry. I've been really trying to go out of my way, okay, not to get so angry, okay? And I am in my heart. I'm upset right now, okay? But what I am more than anything, Joe, is I'm demoralized because I'm going to throw it over to you. I see Father Pavone as a pro-life hero. I see him as a good Catholic priest. You mentioned bringing souls to Christ. He brought Norma McCorvey, the Roe in Roe versus Wade, to the church. He counseled her on her conversion, okay? If the woman is in heaven, it is through the work of the Holy Spirit, but through Father Pavone. You come down on this guy in this way, and everybody else just gets to say whatever they want. Father Martin's out there saying whatever he wants. Joe, I feel a bit demoralized. I'm not
No, it's a double standard.
Or a lot demoralized.
There's no question about that. Like I said, the discipline, it seems like it's always on one side of the aisle. I don't know what else to say. I mean, like, I could go on and on and on about disobedience. And it seems to me that people get a pass. And when something like this, a guy who is, he's unequivocally pro-life, which we all should be, if he's being disobedient, you address it. But to take away the collar, gosh, that's pretty heavy. But I want to get back to what you said about, like, Trump. Trump, like, listen, A priest could be a spiritual advisor to somebody. Clearly, I mean, we all are welcome to have spiritual advisors. A priest shouldn't be political. What I mean by that is this: a priest should be in the public square. So should a bishop. It's about issues, 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 issues. I'll even take it this far. And I think Jesse Romero, who recently during the Carrie Lake campaign said this, and I think I give him a ton of credit. He said what every single cleric and politician should say in America, because it's true. And I actually sent him an email. I said, dude, good for you, because you hit it. You cannot be a voting Democrat and be a Catholic right now.
Well, here's the issue. Let me just try to make this a little bit more clear in the way I'm reading you, okay? Or let me offer my 2 cents. I think that you're exactly right. Then when you talk about, let's just give a quick example, okay? When you get like, let's say, for argument's sake, Chamber of Commerce kind of Republicans, they pay lip service to being pro-life and everything else, and they want an open border because they want the cheap labor. I don't think that that's a shocking statement, Joe Resinello, okay? We know that that takes place. On that issue, you would probably, again, if let's say you were talking about a priest or a bishop, they would be railing against that issue. We shouldn't use people and try to exploit them for cheap labor. So that's an issue. Abortion obviously is an issue. Here's the problem, though, all right? Whether you're talking about abortion, gay marriage, or any of these issues, the Democrat Party has made everything political. So if a priest, Father Pavone, comes out and wears a MAGA hat, says, I'm supporting Donald Trump, let's just say we're putting words in his mouth for the same reason that Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello are supporting Donald Trump in 2016, because he's going to nominate judges that are going to overturn Roe versus Wade. Okay? Now, some people might say he's being political. I would say no. He's zeroing in on abortion, the evil of abortion. He's sticking to that, and he knows the only shot of getting Roe versus Wade overturned is by supporting Donald Trump. Why? Because Donald Trump walks on water? No. Because the Democrat Party has made every single issue that's near and dear to the Catholic Church and Catholics in general, okay, a political one. So my point, and I'll hand it over to you, I think anything that you speak out about now is going to be seen as political, because one side has become completely detached from reality and completely insane. And yeah, that's the Democrat Party. So I don't think he can win either way, Joe.
No, I think, listen, the positions, the radical positions of the Democratic Party, and it's not even abortion, it's infanticide. It's infanticide. Sorry, guys. You are for children that survive an abortion. I'm not making that up. Montana just voted for it. It's infanticide. You cannot be in good conscience, sadly, based upon the positions, based upon the bishop's directive. You talk about obedience. The bishop said so, the intrinsic evils. Write somebody in then. I told you what I did. I wrote in Jesus, Mary, and Joseph for the school board. I didn't know who they were. So they got votes. That's who got votes. 3 people: Jesus, Mary, Joseph.
You mean Jesus got a vote for the school board?
He did, in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. That's no lie. You could vote and fulfill your Catholic obligation to vote. There's certain things you cannot vote for. They're disqualifiers. Sorry. And Jesse Romero is spot on. Every single bishop and priest should be saying that. But here's the thing. If you're going to support wear a MAGA hat, then you got to criticize his merit-based immigration, because that's not a Catholic idea. That's not a Catholic idea. You got to be balanced. A priest is balanced. I am not waving. I am concerned about souls. I'm concerned about Donald Trump's soul. We all should be. Right. I'm concerned about Joe Biden's soul. Most importantly, you got to be balanced. And my point is, you do have to be in the public square, though. You have to talk issues, particularly issues that are counter to the Catholic faith. And abortion is one of them, particularly radical abortion. You have to speak out on that. You have to talk about marriage. You have to talk about transgenderism. You have to. There's no getting around it. Father Kirby, who we interviewed, get the book. He talks about the issues, big issues in the pub. We did an interview on it. Check it out on Veritas Catholic Network. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book. I give him all the credit in the world. He's also very level-headed and balanced. You can do it. It has to be done. That's part of, I think, the issue too, Joe, in fairness. But then again, let's face it. There's a problem in the church too. I mean,
Well, you can go ahead and start talking about that.
let's be honest. I mean, a third of the bishops don't even think that abortion is a preeminent issue. Sorry.
Right.
Sorry. I disagree. Your own documents disagree with it.
Right.
Sorry.
I don't know how they get around that.
Well,
Joe.
well,
I
this is where, again, there's a problem. You know, as they said, 50 years ago, the spirit of the world has got into the church. It's evident. It's evident. And the discipline is always one-sided. It's a fact.
Right.
And this was heavy-handed. You're taking away his collar. Getting back to what my wife said, Frank Pavone has, as far as bringing souls versus pushing souls away, look at, and I hate to bring up a sore subject, but I will. McCarrick, outside of the fact that he had basically inappropriate relationships with minors, which I don't necessarily know. Again, I'm not there. I'm not in the meetings because they blew him out when that happened. But what I do know with certainty is everybody knew that he was an active homosexual.
Right.
And that is a no-no, people.
Right.
You can't be having sex and be a priest. Everyone knew it, but he was a money guy. He brought money in, and they promoted him.
Right.
Shame
Yep.
on the church for that. That is a fact. And you're going to come down on Frank Pavone for being maybe a little vocal, maybe being, he's a passionate guy, like getting a little heated, talking about abortion. You're going to take away his collar. Here's a guy having sex with men. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And you make him a cardinal? Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry. Can't help you there.
Well, I'm gonna throw out there something to you, Joe, at the front line with Joe and Joe. Now, I happen to dig what Father James Altman says in its content. Okay, I think he speaks the truth. I find Father James, and I hope this doesn't cheese anybody off out there, but I think I'm being pretty sober about this. I saw a recent interview with him. I forgot where it was, what venue it was. Joe, he was being outright disrespectful. Father James Martin. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Father Altman. And I agree with Father Altman on a lot of things. Okay. But I've never heard that. Now he's been canceled. We know that Father Altman's been canceled. Okay. But I don't like when he starts calling the Pope Bergoglio and things like that. Now that's like a different case. I know he's very vocal, Father Altman. He's saying the same thing as Jesse Romero said. All right. And I respect Father Altman, but I think he should watch his language a little bit. I do. I don't think we should give our enemies that type of thing. You don't call Pope Francis Bergoglio in an interview. And some other things that he said kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I say that because I never saw Father Pavone do anything like that. Okay. Outright disrespect. And yet they came down on him. Another thing, too, are they going to come down on Sister Dee Dee Byrne? I mean, she gave a speech at the Republican National Convention. Right. And everybody loved it. Donald Trump had her there. Right. She said, I'm not only pro-life, I'm pro-eternal life. And she gave a great short speech there. Are they going to come down on her because she appeared at the Republican National Convention because Donald Trump asked her to? I mean, is this going to end again? But if you say whatever you want, again, I forgot the woman's name in our Sunday Visitor. I read an article about her. She said, you can't compare Father Martin to Father Pavone. Said because he's under the authority of his order. Okay, so what? What do you mean the order's not under the authority of the Pope? In the history of the church, didn't the Pope at some point in history disband the Jesuits? If I remember correctly. All right, I could have that wrong, but I remember they've been chastised in the past. They've been disciplined in the past. What do you mean that Father Martin, because he's under the authority of his order, that he doesn't? It's not a good comparison. I think it's a completely appropriate comparison. Father James Martin openly makes statements against the church, says things that the church doesn't know how to love. I'm paraphrasing him, but the church doesn't know how to love. He says the most horrible things about people like us. people that support teaching on homosexuality as being intrinsically disordered, okay, and that sodomy being a mortal sin. He says disgusting things about us, and yet he could say whatever he wants. I never really heard Father Pavone say those things about other people, but here we are. Father Pavone is the one that's gotten defrocked.
Again,
And I think
it's
it's
a double
unfair.
standard. But getting back to what you were saying about like an order, a bishop invites an order into his diocese, and he or she can disinvite them. So, like, basically, it's your fiefdom when you're a bishop. And if you have needs, like, I'll just pick an example. Say you have a place where there's a lot of poor people, you might invite the missionaries of charity to address the poverty. If you are in a place where, say, it's like highbrow people, high intellect people, you might invite the Dominicans to teach there because
Right.
people, it's they can say, listen, I don't want you here. But there's a lack, frankly, there's a lack of courage. Listen, I'll get back to the universities. I remember when Benedict came to America and he addressed that at Catholic University. He basically said, a Catholic school, he was very gracious, but he addressed the issues. I mean, we have Catholic universities that are nominally Catholic.
Right.
And that's not being like unfair. That's just factual. People have been saying that forever.
Well,
Nominally.
did you real quick? Did you hear the one story? I remember Michael Voris was on the campus of. He's a graduate of University of Notre Dame, and he was there for something. This was within the last, I guess, several years. Within the last 3 or 4 years, Michael Voris said he went up to Father Jenkins. He saw him on the campus, and he wanted to question him about the Catholicity of Notre Dame. He said Father Jenkins grabbed him by his collar and says, "We're the most Catholic university in this country," and dismissed him and walked away. Father Jenkins is delusional if he thinks that Notre Dame is
Notre
Catholic.
Dame, I'm not going to knock because there's definitely good aspects. I mean, you
Oh,
can't
they have some excellent professors, some of whom we've
absolutely
interviewed.
100%. But like a lot of times these schools become icons. It's like an icon, like Georgetown, Notre Dame. That's getting off the subject. But like getting back to like Benedict, these schools have been disobedient.
Sure.
They're frankly, and nothing happens. The bishops don't. A bishop can take the Catholic name off of a university. He could say to Georgetown University, listen, I can't control what you do in that school because I'm not a Jesuit, but I control the name Catholic on that school. I could take it off, but they don't.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, as I told my wife, listen, when I got married, I did not get married to go to hell, which means that I have got to adhere as a husband to the teachings of the Catholic Church to the best of my ability. I have to also agree with them. That doesn't mean I do them perfectly because I'm a sinner. I have to acknowledge them and aspire to do them to the best of my ability. And when I fall, I have to go to confession. The same goes for a bishop. That's your job, guy. Listen, and if you're not going to do it, just like me, I have responsibilities as a Catholic husband and father. You have responsibilities as a bishop. If you're not willing to address those things, frankly, you're in the wrong job. Sorry. And just as I will be judged on my vocation as a husband and a father, you too will be judged as well.
I don't know if they realize that sometimes, Joe. I really don't.
Joe, it's taken for granted. Some do. I think Bishop Strickland is a great example of someone who takes his job very seriously. But that is a very, very like that ridden with responsibility. Ridden with responsibility.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. To take the job of a bishop, you should tremble. Tremble with the responsibility. And here's the thing. If the church at large is going to not let you do it, then take it away. Like again, getting back to how I phrased it, I didn't get married to go to hell. As a Catholic, this goes for anybody who's been married in the Catholic Church, not just me. A lot of people get married in the church. There's certain things you say I do to, one of which is being open to life.
Right.
That's part of the deal. You said it. I didn't. which means God's holding you to it because you acknowledged it. And here's the thing. As a priest, if I was a priest and you came to me to get married in the church, I have a responsibility to lay out to you before you do it everything the church expects of you and your wife. And you're free to disagree with it, but then don't get married there. Don't get married
Right.
there. It's the same thing with the bishop. If you have responsibility, you have this responsibility to your universities, to the teacher, to teaching, to be a catechist, the whole deal, orders, the whole deal. If you're not going to do that, you're in the wrong job.
Joe, and I got to tell you something. Joe, I agree with you 1,000%. You're listening to the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello. We're way in the breach. We're talking about the church. We're talking about Father Pavone. We're talking about Father being laicized. You're with us on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Remember, the two places you could find Joe and I, we're really trying to build up the front line with Joe and Joe on YouTube. The front line with Joe and Joe on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. We just started a Twitter page. Now the Twitter seems to be a real town hall, a real free speech arena that Joe and I want to try to make our voices known. So at with Joe and Joe, at with Joe and Joe on Twitter. Follow us there. And of course, please visit crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, and become a subscriber. Joe, that's really, I think we've kind of exhausted this a little bit. But like you said, there's one thing I want to clarify to all those people out there. I love Father Altman. I really do. I think he's spot on. I don't like when I see somebody I really like, kind of like get a little angry. And again, I've been angry in the past, and I don't like when it seems to me that Father was being a little disrespectful towards Pope Francis by calling him Bergoglio. But I understand what they're going through. And Joe, I want to give a quick anecdote, if I may. We've seen this publicly, okay? And what you just said about pre-Cana and things like that kind of jarred something in my memory. These priests have such a hard time. You look at Father Altman getting canceled. You see Father Pavone, let's just say we don't know, like Father Imperato says, we don't know the whole story, okay? Maybe more will come out. But we could say that part of the motivation for going after Father Pavone is because he's so vocal. But on a local level, right? I heard, just like when I was living in Lyndhurst, okay, in Jersey. Everybody knows I'm out in Arizona now, okay? Our local priest, all right, he was a missionary priest. He had the pastor of the parish for 12 years. He was coming up on his 12 years. He was a missionary priest. This guy, when we first got there, my wife and I, Joe, and we heard what he had gone through with the lay people in that parish, because he would preach on abortion, on homosexuality. He would preach on transgenderism. Okay, his homilies were hard-hitting and challenging, like a priest is supposed to be. Joe, this was in the Archdiocese of Newark. The people canceled him. The people picked up the phone and called the Archdiocese and canceled Father Jim. So when his 12 years was up, you know what happened? They shipped him back. Even though he was such a spot-on Orthodox priest, very loving, pastoral, caring, told me things I didn't want to hear. Okay. So I say that, I tell you that story, and I tell the people out there on the Crusade Channel because it really means a lot. We have to defend these priests because guess what? It's yes, to use the word, it's liberal, dissenting Catholics who don't want to hear the truth on abortion, on contraception, on in vitro, on all of it, that a lot of times get these priests in trouble. Because they pick up the phone and they call the archdiocese or the diocese, and they basically rat these guys out for preaching from an Orthodox point of view.
To piggyback on what you're saying versus a lot of things in the chat room, then that's okay. Christ said that you will be hated because of me. I read something like in a meme. A lot of these memes sometimes do have something to say. It said, don't follow the celebrity priest. Good priests are hated. And that's true. When you speak, Jesus Christ had enemies. He had enemies. They killed him. This is who, in many times, it's the hated priest who basically, and here's the thing, if you cancel me, so be it. Send me. God will take care of me, and he will defend me if I'm on his side, always. That doesn't mean I'm not going to suffer. But I did not, Father Imperato said this too. I did not become a priest to go to hell. I didn't
Mhm.
get married to go to hell. There are responsibilities with your vocation. Then cancel me. Cancel me. I trust God. You see, it's a lack of faith. And I don't want the status. I don't care about the position, like whether it's the bishop, the priest, whatever the position. We have to stand with Christ and we have to suffer. I went to confession recently, a very good priest, Father Don Haggerty. I go to confession with him often at St. Patrick's, very holy priest. And I was expressing, I'll be truthful with you, in the confession, my anger at the political situation. And he
Mhm.
said, Joe, this is what he said. I'll share it with all of you. He said, Joe, you have to watch that because you have to suffer with Christ. Just like Jesus suffered, he suffered for telling the truth. His own people rejected him, his own people.
Mhm.
We have to suffer with Jesus. And to be honest with you, I think that we reject that. The church, the priests, the laity, we don't want to suffer. Well, you know something? You're in the wrong business then.
Yeah.
That's in the pew versus all the way up to the bishop.
We do have
Being
to
a
remember.
Catholic and speaking the truth, you will suffer. And if you're not willing to do it, I got news for you guys. We're in the wrong business. We're in the wrong religion. It's part of
Well,
the deal.
I was just going to say, I mean, I have yet, Joe, to actually sit down and dig deep into the Old Testament, but I've read the New Testament several times. But here's one thing I do know: it is up and down Scripture, but it's also very. And again, I'm speaking for myself. I don't want to speak for you. I don't want to speak for anybody else out there. I don't question God per se. But the thing that's in my mind and the things that's in my heart, but what we do learn from Scripture, and is why I bring it up, is that the Lord in his wisdom allows evil men to have their day. And it quite frankly, Joe, it sucks. Okay. When wicked men have power, and they've had it, Joe, going back to the beginning. This is not something that's new. You know, like when you look at what the Democrat parties do, we're talking about going back way, way back into Old Testament history. Okay. Into salvation history. Okay. God allows wicked men to have power. All right. Wicked men stoned the prophets. They didn't want to hear what the prophets had to say. Okay. Wicked men have persecuted the church, sometimes from within the church. God allows it to happen. And that's why I'm trying to keep that in my head. And that's the reason why I bring it up. I'm trying not to get too angry because we're not unique in human history, Joe. You and I and the people that are alive right now who, let's say, I think are suffering somewhat under the current hierarchy of the church. I think if you speak orthodoxy, you have a target on your back, especially if you are, quote unquote, a celebrity priest. Okay, you're more well known. But even others who are lay people have a lot to say, a lot of good things to say. You know, a lot of people, want to shut them down too. I mean, we brought up before. I mean, I'll just give you an example. Look at what we found out from the Vatican. It was within the last couple of years. They wanted to shut down Raymond Arroyo. I mean, really? I mean, Raymond Arroyo, I mean, who to me is one of the fairest guys there is in Catholic media. You want to shut down Raymond Arroyo because he has what he calls the papal posse and they discuss what's coming out of Rome? I mean, this is the level that we're at right now. Even a level-headed, sober-minded guy like Raymond Arroyo is under attack and threatened. EWTN is threatened by the Vatican that you need to take him off the air. And it's very, very frustrating, I guess, Joe Rossinello, is my underlying point. What say you?
Well, I'll tell you this: God does permit free will, and there have been times where evil men had their day, but all things work for the good. God takes I when I pray the rosary, particularly the third sorrowful mystery about the crowning of thorns, I think about how the people chose Barabbas over Jesus. On the surface, that was such a horrible, horrible choice. Why did they do it? It wasn't that they didn't like Jesus, they didn't like the truth. They rejected the truth because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But look at how God used that choice. Christ's death brought salvation to the whole world. So we have to always keep that in the front of our minds, that as things unfold, God is using them in ways that we cannot see. And we have to trust him. Also keep in mind that mystery. And I think of this too. The reason why the people rejected Christ, the same people that saw all the miracles, is he didn't meet their expectation. He didn't come into Jerusalem like a king. He came like a humble servant on a mule. And they rejected him because they trusted in their own ideas as opposed to God's salvation plan. We have to trust God knows what he's doing. He sees everything. He knows what he's doing, and he will level all of the mountains. That's in scripture. Everything that's not grounded in God will be turned to dust. It's in his time. It's for us to be faithful. And what do I mean by that? We speak the truth, we know the truth, we live the truth, and we suffer for the truth. Let the chips fall where they may. Let them fall where they may.
Well, that's it. Well, and Joe, it's we do have to remember that. Okay, no question about it. And don't worry, I'm not going to say but. I'm not going to say that because that's absolutely correct. Nothing to expand on there. It is frustrating to go through. Sometimes it's makes one fearful when you look at, let's say, the level of corruption in the human element of the church, and for anybody to deny that the church has a certain level of corruption right now, maybe not seen too many times in the history of the church. I mean, when you talk about the effect of money, the political influence in the church, okay? When you talk about, we mentioned earlier the bishops in Winnipeg that rebelled against Pope Paul VI and Humani Vitae. Look at the German bishops right now, okay? I mean, these guys are threatening schism, and somehow, some way, they're still wearing their collar.
That's what I'm saying.
Father Pavone is not threatening schism. Father Altman is not threatening schism. They're not saying that we need to branch off and go find our own version of Catholicism. Okay? They're firmly within the church. Okay? But then they get the hammer dropped down on them. And are you kidding me? These German bishops are openly saying now that they want to embrace gay marriage. Okay. And again, you talk about 50 years ago, you and I were kids when Humani Vitae came out. How did they get away with it? How does, like we mentioned earlier, how does Notre Dame get away with saying, well, we have a lay board of directors and we're not under the authority of the bishop? Yes, you are. Just because the bishop hasn't done anything about it. He could, like you said, Joe, maybe they changed things legally, but you could tell the University of Notre Dame, from now on, you're the University of South Bend, Indiana. But you're taking the name of Our Lady off that church.
If you try to do that and the Vatican says no, then take me out of my role. You're not going to take me out of my role.
Take me out then.
I did not become a priest to become a bishop. I was called to be a priest. I'll be Father Joe in some podunk place. By the way, the Saint John Vianney, who's the patron of all priests, he was in a backwater town 200 miles outside of Paris because they didn't think he was smart. Well, guess what? He was holy.
Right.
That's all that matters. Like, ultimately, that's how we'll be measured. Ultimately, all of us, that is how we will be measured, not by our titles, not by how many likes we get, not by celebrity.
Right.
Did you live up to your baptismal promises? Did you meet your vocation vows, whatever they are? And here's the deal. If you don't want to do that, i.e. you're a priest, i.e. you're a married man, i.e. you're a bishop, you're in the wrong job.
Well, right, exactly. John Everett Button is in the chat room. He says, I love this. He says, for whatever it's worth, it's along the lines of what we were saying, Joe. For whatever it's worth, the church has survived far worse than this. I would agree. John says, I just trust that whatever happens is God's will. Amen, John. And that's what we're saying. Joe, I'd love to give an example. And I think we've talked about it before on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Okay. when Saint Thomas More, I got to remind people, was not a priest. He was not a bishop. Saint John Fisher was. Okay, and both of them were martyred. Now we have not gone underground yet. Okay, hopefully God will spare us that. But to John Button's point in the chat room, you look at what happened to the church in England after, and we look at what happened to St. Thomas More, to St. John Fisher, the confiscation of church property, the criminalizing of the Catholic Church under good Queen Bess. Well, first her father, all right, Fat Henry VIII, and then good Queen Bess. This is not new in church history. Wolsey was more, he was more concerned with England needs an heir. He was more concerned with the politics. He wasn't concerned with saving people's souls. St. Thomas More and St. John Fisher were concerned with saving people's souls and the preservation of the church so that they could do that and follow their mission in England. Church, when Joe, think about it. The church had to go underground for 300 years, 200 to 300 years. The church was underground. They had priest holes so that they go from one manor to another. They had to go literally underground. The priest had to go from one house to another so that they could say priest and under the stairs. Okay, they alluded to it in that garbage Protestant movie Elizabeth, okay, when that movie first came out, but because they were mocking it. But we know that these people were heroes. The church has been through this before, Joe, and unfortunately, that's why I mentioned Wolsey. Some of our enemies are in the church, and we really just have to, I hate to sound like this, we really have to deal with it in the best way we can and do like you said. We have to remember who's in charge of this church. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes because the fog of war, if you consider this, Joe, a spiritual battle in the cultural war, the fog of war clouds our judgment sometimes, clouds our eyesight. We have to remember who's in charge of the church. I believe Father Pavone knows who's in charge of the church, and I don't think he's fearful of anything because he knows who he's ultimately going to be answerable to. Your thoughts, Joe?
Well, I also think, and this is, I direct this to me, like I'm not going to direct it to anybody else. It's pride because we want to fix things. I read something a while ago that always stuck with me. It talked about reforming the church, and it said the great reformers of the church. This was the article. It talked about Catherine of Siena. It talked about Teresa of Avila. It talked about Francis of Assisi. These were great reformers of a church that was in disrepair. They did it through holiness. And what the article went on to say is if you try to fix the church like you would a secular organization, you will wind up getting frustrated and could even wind up leaving it. And we saw that, and I'm not I pray for him. I see him on my feed constantly, and I actually pray for the guy a lot, is Steve Skojic. He left the church.
Yeah.
He formed, dude, 1 Peter 5 was a monster Catholic blog. He left the church. And I think and again, I'm not going to speak for him, and I pray for the guy. But
well, he's a good guy.
But I think he tried to fix it on his own. Like he put something on his shoulders that he couldn't do. And that's where I think we lose sight of things. That's why I think you made me think of him. God will fix the church. We have to be faithful. That is our role. Do our part. But the fight isn't ours. It's God's. And we're not fixing the church. The church is perfect. The people in it aren't. In order to make others see that, we have to become holy. We can do that. That's within our decisions each and every day. That's how we fix the church. Mm-hmm. Really. That's within our wheelhouse. The rest of it, I think, Joe, sometimes for me, it becomes pride. I want to fix this. I want to fix the political situation. I want to fix this. Right. I can't do anything except control me.
I remember when we first started the Frontline with Joe and Joe, I'm like, I'm going to evangelize the world. You know what? I think God quickly humbled me in that regard. Said, listen, one day, one step at a time there, Joe, one step at a time. We can only do our part. That's it. I'm not in control of the church. And like you said, Walrus Moose is in the chat room. He says the greatest fight is with ourselves. Yeah. You want to radiate Christ's love out to the world. You want to be a magnet so that people come into the church and I hate to say it this way, kind of clean the church out a little bit. Because if there's one thing that liberal Catholics, Joe, don't like, it's our Protestant brothers and sisters who either convert or revert to the church, because they're usually very on fire. Okay. They don't like them too much. They're usually very orthodox. They came into the church not because of the men in the church. They came into the church because of the teachings of the church. We see that a lot. I happen to follow many people who have converted or reverted from either evangelicalism or a certain form of Calvinism or Lutheranism. They're kind of hated. Those people got a lot of stones. They come into the church. But my larger point is, what am I going to change? I could do the best I can to live the life of a Roman Catholic, okay? And hopefully other people see that, okay? Both in terms of the way I live my life as a husband and father, and how I interact with people at the church itself, okay? What I do, what I care about, and that's what I think attracts people. You'd be surprised. I know that you do the rosary. I used to do it with you before I moved, the first Saturday of the month, okay? Here I'm with a group of guys. We did a Jericho march this past Saturday. We prayed the rosary around the capital of Arizona, around the capital in Phoenix, 7 times. We did a Jericho march. Joe, this is powerful witness. You don't even know. You won't even imagine how many people see that, okay? See you praying in front of a church in Bergen County. See us praying, walking around the state capitol like a bunch of freaks. Well, you know what? You know how many people beep their horns? You know how many people give us the thumbs up? Like, in other words, to see what we're doing? I think that's what radiates. That's what we have to remember, is that start with us. I'm not going to get involved too much with this conflict with Father Pavone. Father Pavone knows what he's doing. So do the people that have defrocked him. They know what they're doing. And Father Pavone said he's not, once he says he has the right to appeal, not under Pope Francis, but if he's still alive and Pope Francis is not, he'll appeal to the next Pope, he said. All right. I think he's being fairly respectful about it. I don't think he's being bashing to anybody. He's coming down a little hard on the bishop that was, I think, kicked him out of his diocese. But I think he's being pretty even keel about it. We have to trust the Lord is in charge here. I know that was a little bit of a rant, but we do have to remember that. Whether it's the politics within the church or the politics in our country, we have to remember who's in charge, always.
I agree, Joe. I mean, to be truthful with you, also what I would say is we have to get into a regimen. Like, up your game. Like, up your game. If you are sick of what you're seeing, like in America, or even frankly within the church, up your game. Fast. Pray more. Go to adoration. Read the scripture every day. Like, I'm telling you, these are things that change us. You see, like, we as guys, people like, oh, I go to jujitsu class 2 times a week. I work out 6 times a week, 2 hours a day. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I run. I do this. Great. What are you doing to change you? As in, empty yourself of you. See, I'm telling you, holy people stop traffic. Yeah. I say this because I've met them. I've met them in the Missionaries of Charity. Dude, I'm telling you. And they pray like 4 hours a day. I can't do that, but I can do some things. Get up early, read the scripture. Go to adoration on the weekends. Pray the rosary. Go to church and receive the sacrament. Go to confession twice a month, every week. Dude, I'm going to tell you right now, that'll change you. And that will change your house. That'll change your community, and it'll bear fruit. And that is, I'm telling you, if all Catholics did that, the country changes tomorrow. It changes tomorrow, but it'll change the way God wants it to. We have to do those things. I think when we die and we stand before the Lord, he's going to show us what we could have been, what we could have done if we did those things, what we could have accomplished and
Yeah.
didn't because of our sloth, because of our selfishness. I'm telling you, that is how we do it. That's how Francis did it. Francis had a humongous impact on the Catholic Church, and he was simply holy.
I I love the way we brought him up earlier in a different context, but I love the way Father Carapi used to tell the story of Bishop Fulton Sheen. And he said, Father, Bishop Fulton Sheen, he used to come in front of the seminarians and he'd yell at them and say, I have more power than all of you. And he talked about the holy hour. You reminded me of that because Bishop Sheen prayed a holy hour every single day. Now, you want to talk about bringing souls to Christ, to the church? You want to talk about having a primetime show on NBC, the highest rated show on NBC? Bishop Fulton Sheen went out to a lot of people. His message, the gospel message, not his message, the gospel message through him went out to millions and millions and millions of people. He was one of the most loved people, in the history of America. Okay. But he said, I'll go up in front of those seminarians and tell them I have more power than all of you because I do a holy hour every single morning. Get the grace, get the protection, then go out and fight the battle. Joe Resinello, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. I think this was a good conversation. I'm glad we picked apart a lot of different things. Let's all pray for Father Frank Pavone. Let's all pray for Priests for Life. Let's all pray for those particularly in American society and culture that are speaking the way Joe and I are, or many people who are doing it much better than us who are out there. Let's pray for one another that we keep preaching the truth out there. And yes, commenting on the politics and the culture because they're serving it up to us. And we have an obligation to comment on it. Please remember to follow Joe and I on YouTube at The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Please support us on Twitter. Okay, we're going to start posting on Twitter. We'd love for you to follow us there at With Joe and Joe, at With Joe and Joe. You can follow us there. And as always, we thank Mike Church for being gracious enough to allow us a platform on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. We encourage you all to go to the crusadechannel.com. Open the hood, kick the tires. We know you're going to want to become a subscriber. So thank you all. We had a great audience tonight for a great and important conversation. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.